Hello, everyone. I'm Lynette Schaefer, and in this video, I'm going to explain the DOE's recently published 2 new final rules relating to general service lamps. So general service lamps, also referred to as GSL lamps, these are your traditional type of light bulbs that have been used since really the early 20th century. So if you were to type in GSL into your web browser, you're probably going to see some images that would appear to be something like this. Now, GSL lamps sort of have that classic pear-like light bulb shape and are used in many applications, especially in residential. I'm sure many of you are familiar with these, right? Now, back many years ago, when we would say GSL lamps, we would automatically think of that Thomas Edison incandescent lamp. However, the evolution of artificial light has obviously progressed from incandescent to compact fluorescent, and now, of course, LEDs. And of course, there's been more progression in between all those, but specifically from a residential standpoint and kind of a general surface type of lamp, incandescent, compact fluorescent, and now, of course, LEDs. So recently, the definition of GSL was actually expanded to now include incandescent, including halogen, CFLs, LEDs, and OLEDs. The reason for that is because a lot of these technologies have replaced that well-known Thomas Edison lamp that many of us are familiar with. Now, these GSL lamps are used in general lighting applications, and they account for the majority of installed lighting in residential applications. But just keep in mind, when we say residential, that could also be a motel, it could be a hotel, it could be a dorm room. So just sort of keep in mind, residential doesn't just mean, homes that people live in. It can also expand greater than that. Now, many of us are already aware that traditional incandescent lamps are extremely non-energy efficient, making it very costly to operate. And of course, LEDs are much more energy efficient, making them fairly inexpensive to operate. Now, over the course of many years, the DOE, which is the Department of Energy, has imposed energy efficient standards and rules, which affect the use of these different types of GSL lamps. And more importantly, besides the energy efficiency requirements, we have now advanced to where many of these lamps can no longer even be sold, whether by a manufacturer or by a distributor, because if they do sell them, manufacturer or distributor, they can be charged some pretty hefty fines. Now, the thing to understand is that you can't just assume that every single lamp is affected by the regulations and rules set forth by the DOE. Of course, that's what makes it kind of tricky, right? So first of all, what does this mean? Well, there are lamps that are not included in these regulations, like appliance lamps, black lights, bug lights, colored lamps, HID lamps. So none of those high pressure sodiums or mercury vapors or any of that, they're not included. Plant lamps, the globe shaped lamps with a 5-inch diameter or more. Also reflector lamps that are less than 2 inches in diameter. And then there's some other specialty type lamps too. I would recommend going out to the DOE's website to get the full list of all of those that are not part of the GSL regulations. Now, to help further understand what lamps are part of the DOE's regulations, they have recently come up with a more defined definition. So one, it's important to understand that GSL lamps include incandescents, CFLs, LEDs, and OLEDs, which stand for organic LEDs. Keep in mind, when we say incandescent, this now also includes halogen. That's a new update. Now, a general surface lamp is defined as lamps that have an ANSI base, operate at voltages which include 12, 24, 100 to 130, 220 to 240, or 277. And additionally, they also have an initial lumen output of greater than or equal to 310 lumens, so greater than or equal to 310 lumens, and less than or equal to 3,300. Those are the two numbers to remember, between 310 and 3,300 lumens. And again, these are typically used in general lighting applications. All right, so just those are the kind of the key points to kind of keep in mind. Now, GSL lamps will not be a light fixture, and they will also not be an LED downlight retrofit either. Now, you're going to notice on the slide, I have a definitions rule in parentheses up in the upper right-hand corner. And this is because this is one of the new rules, because remember when I first started this presentation, I said there's 2 new rules that are put in place by the DOE. This is one of them. So these 2 new rules recently published are referred to as the final rules. As this article published just June 9th, 2022 explains, the first rule expands the definition of GSL and general surface lamps. And this is called, again, the definitions rule. Now, to drive home what I said in the previous slide, this article says many in the industry don't realize the impact of this expanded GSL definition on many LED lamps. Most of the public discussion around the new GSL definition is really focused on the addition of incandescent and halogen specialty lamps. However, the new expanded GSL definition encompasses many LED lamps in addition to incandescent and halogen. That is the key takeaway in this particular rule. Now, the article goes on to say that this means that many LED A lamps, LED specialty lamps, and LED tube lamps will now be regulated by the DOE. And then the rest of the article explains the forms that manufacturers need to complete to confirm their products are in compliance. Yes, there's a lot of testing, a lot of forms, a lot of stuff we have to do from a manufacturer standpoint to ensure we're in compliance. But it also mentions, this article mentions that there's a new 45 lumen per watt backstop rule, and how this could pose problems for LED lamps, specifically those that are greater than 45 lumens per watt. And yes, the backstop rule is the second rule. So the first rule is the definitions rule, and the key takeaway is don't just think incandescent. The rules and regulations expand much further than just incandescents and incandescent lamps. And the second rule is that backstop rule, and that rule specifically pertains to lumens per watts, and it prohibits the sale of any general surface lamp that does not meet a minimum efficacy standard of 45 lumens per watt. So some of the things to think about: 310 lumens, so 3,300 lumens, that's sort of helpful. And then also this efficiency standard of 45 lumens per watt. Now, if a manufacturer or distributor does sell these after a specific date, which we'll get into in the next slide, there's some pretty stiff penalties. As a matter of fact, it is the responsibility of everyone in the supply chain to understand these two final rules and help ensure everyone complies. Not only, again, can the manufacturer be fined, but the entire supply chain, including distribution, is also affected. Now, as a manufacturer, we do have some time to so-called get our ducks in a row prior to these penalties being enforced. However, we also don't want to wait until the last minute. So according to this chart, the production date or date of entry into the US begins January 1st, 2023. And this is when full enforcement of these rules will go into effect. Now, our plan at EiKO is to try to stop selling to distribution by the end of 2022. Also note, beginning August 1st, 2023, no one, including a manufacturer or distributor, is allowed to sell any inventory of any of these products. So August 1st, 2023, that's the important date. If a distributor has any of this inventory still sitting on their shelves, they are not allowed to sell it after August 1st, 2023 without full enforcement with penalties beginning. All right, so that's an important date. Now, this means we need to communicate to our distributor partners, our contractors, and our end users. Everyone in the supply chain needs to be proactive. Look at what your customers are purchasing. Start transitioning them to products that are in compliance with the DOE's regulations. We need to educate everyone, ourselves and others, so we can all get comfortable with these regulations. If you have an end user using these lamps, this is probably a good time to stock up, right? Nothing terrible bad with that. Also, stay in the know by registering for EiKO's newsletter. This can be found at eiko.com under About Us. Easily register for that. Every few weeks, we send out this informational newsletter where you can easily download a list of the retiring lamps. You can see that right in your email. It'll look exactly like you see on my screen. And then once you download the file, you'll get an Excel version, which allows you to easily sort and filter by products. As well as, I love this last column, it is the suggested replacement. So this is where you could go and say, oh, my customer's buying a lot of these products. We better get them transitioned over to something that's in compliance. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention is that it's important to understand that some states have their own regulations or have their own pending regulations. Now, states with their own state regulations include California, Colorado, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Nevada, Vermont, and Washington. States that have their own regulations currently in effect, but we're seeing additional regulations pending in these states, so more rules are going to be coming, are Maine, Washington, D.C., and also New York. Those with pending regulations, meaning there's nothing enforced right now, nothing additional, I should say, versus what the DOE has. Of course, the DOE applies to all the states, but there's some other pending regulations for some other states, which are New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Rhode Island, and Oregon. Now, this is consistently changing, so please be sure to check the DOE's website for updates. It's important to understand the regulations that apply to your specific state. And of course, if you're a national distributor, it's important to understand the various requirements throughout the entire United States, because you got to make sure you don't sell products into some of these specific states based on their specific regulation. Now, we have provided additional information on these new rules and other legislation and energy regulations at eiko.com under the resource tab. However, the most up-to-date information can always be found at the Department of Energy's website. By the way, if you go out to our website and you do go to resources, if you don't see anything on legislation or energy regulations, it may not be completely built out until closer to the beginning of July. We are just in the process of adding that to our website as we speak, and right now it's about mid-June. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions, let us know, and thank you again.